You come to me and ask for a favor, but you show me no respect. Yeah, you know the line. Don Corleone, the Godfather, classic, and instantly the whole vibe pops into your head. Sharp suits, fedoras, cigars, whiskey on the table, maybe a Tommy gun nearby, a smoky club, a femme fatale, and a backroom full of secrets. But that's just the Hollywood version. Today we're talking about the real mafia. Not some movie mobsters, but the actual organizations. Built over decades, ruthless, structured, powerful, with their own rules, their own justice, their own politics. You hear people talk about shadow governments, global conspiracies. Sounds like a stretch, right? But if any group ever truly pulled strings behind the scenes, it's these guys. So welcome to the story where there's no fiction, just cold reality, money, power, silence. This isn't just organized crime, this is the system behind it all. All right, so you think the mafia started with some dude in a pinstripe suit whispering in dark alleyways? Nah, man. Rewind to the late 1800s. Picture dirty, overcrowded tenements in New York City's Little Italy. Sicilian immigrants, broke and beaten down, came chasing the American dream. But what they got instead was hard labor, no respect, and a system that didn't give a damn. So what did they do? They brought their own system. Enter La Mano Nera, the Black Hand. These early gangs weren't organized like the mafia we know now. It was more like a bunch of tough guys extorting local businesses with handwritten threats and promises of protection. One of the first infamous names? Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria. This guy basically ran the show in NYC during the 1920s. But before we get to him, let's talk structure. Because the mob wasn't just a street gang, it was organized, like military-level structure. At the top, you had the boss, El Jefe, then the underboss, acting like a COO. The consigliere? That's the advisor, the guy whispering strategy into the boss's ear. Under them were capos, captains running crews of soldiers who did the dirty work. At the bottom? Associates, not made men yet, but still in the game. Oh, and to get made, you had to be 100% Italian, preferably Sicilian. And yeah, you had to make your bones, read, kill someone. So how'd all this evolve into what we now call the Five Families? That's where Salvatore Lucky Luciano walks in. This dude was a game changer. Born in Sicily, raised in the NYC streets, he realized the old-school bosses were stuck in the past. Too much honor, not enough hustle. He wanted to run things like a business, and he hated the drama between Mustache Pete's, the traditionalists, and the young bloods like himself. Cue the Castellamarese War, a bloody power struggle in the early 30s between Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. Bodies dropped all over the city. In a savage twist, Luciano flipped on both bosses and had them whacked. He literally killed his way to peace. And then he created the Commission, a board of directors for the mob, with bosses from the Five Families in New York, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo. Each ran their own crew, but reported to the Commission. No more civil wars, just business. Drugs, unions, gambling, you name it. Oh, and here's a juicy detail. In the 1930s, they already had their hooks in the cheese industry. Yeah, you read that right. Cheese. They controlled wholesale distribution in parts of Brooklyn. If you wanted to sell mozzarella, you had to kiss the ring. No ring, no ricotta. But as Luciano was building this mob empire like a Fortune 500 company, something else was brewing. So, boom, it's 1920. The U.S. government does something kind of dumb. They ban booze. No more beer, no more whiskey, not even wine for grandma. Enter the 18th Amendment and Prohibition, aka the greatest business opportunity the mafia could ever ask for. You want a party? You're going to have to pay. And who's supplying the sauce? You guessed it, the mob. This is where the mafia stops being just some neighborhood muscle and starts printing money. They ran speakeasies, secret bars, smuggled booze from Canada, bribed cops, and even had breweries running under fake fronts. Forget robbing banks. Booze was the real gold mine. Now you can't talk Prohibition without mentioning Al Capone, the OG gangster from Chicago. This guy wasn't just making money, he was running the damn city. Capone, born to Italian immigrants in Brooklyn, worked his way up under Johnny Torrio. When Torrio got whacked, well, nearly, Capone took over and turned Chicago into a mob playground. By the mid-20s, Capone was making $100 million a year. That's over $1 billion today. He controlled liquor, gambling, and prostitution rackets. He had politicians in his pocket and cops on payroll. But he wasn't exactly subtle. He flaunted his wealth, threw wild parties, and rolled around in bulletproof Cadillacs. Basically, he painted a giant target on his back. Rival gangs weren't too happy, especially the Irish and Jewish crews. So, in classic mob fashion, Capone hit first. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929 was pure carnage. 7 men from the rival North Side gang were lined up against a wall and machine-gunned by hitmen dressed as cops. No witnesses, no mercy. Capone wasn't even in town. Classic alibi move. But the feds weren't blind. They couldn't get him on murder. No one ever could, so they hit him where it hurt, his wallet. Enter the IRS. Turns out Capone was so busy cooking the books, he forgot to file tax returns. Yep, tax evasion brought down the most feared mobster in America. In 1931, he got slapped with 11 years in the slammer. Meanwhile, back in New York, Lucky Luciano was watching all this go down and learning a lesson. Don't be flashy, don't be sloppy, and never let your soldiers get too loud. The real money was in staying invisible. One little-known twist? The mob actually teamed up with the U.S. government during World War II. Luciano cut a deal with the Navy to protect the docks from Nazi saboteurs. In exchange, he got a cushy prison deal and was later deported to Italy. Да, правительство реально обратилось к мафии за помощью. Crazy, huh? But while Capone was rotting in Alcatraz and Luciano was reorganizing the mob like a CEO, a new threat was rising. The FBI was finally paying attention. All right, the 1940s and 50s, that's when the Mafia stopped playing small-time street games and started thinking big league. No more just shaking down butchers or running corner bookie joints. We're talking full-on infiltration of labor unions, national trucking routes, and the hottest new money printing machine in the U.S., Las Vegas. After World War II, America was booming. Highways, suburbs, Hollywood glamour, and the mob wanted their slice. Remember Lucky Luciano? Yeah, the guy who basically invented the modern mob? Even after getting deported to Italy in '46, his influence lived on. His boys, especially Meyer Lansky, his financial brainiac, had a new target: the desert. Las Vegas was just sand and tumbleweeds before the mob rolled in. Then came Bugsy Siegel, a flashy Jewish gangster and friend of Luciano and Lansky. He had this crazy idea: build a luxurious casino in the middle of nowhere. That casino? The Flamingo? It bombed at first, but once the mob figured out how to run Vegas with style and skimming cash off the top, it exploded. By the 50s, they had their hands in nearly every major casino. Here's the trick. The mob controlled the Teamsters Union, especially under Jimmy Hoffa. Through their pension fund, aka a giant pile of workers' retirement money, they funneled millions into Vegas construction projects. Think of it like laundering cash through drywall and neon lights. Everyone got paid, except the IRS, of course. Meanwhile, back east, the Mafia was tightening its grip on labor unions, longshoremen, construction, trucking. You wanted your goods unloaded at the docks? Better have an envelope ready? Want to build a skyscraper in Manhattan? Talk to the Genovese or Lucchese families first. They didn't just break knees. They ran supply chains. Quietly, efficiently. Now, up till this point, the FBI, especially under J. Edgar Hoover, pretty much acted like the mob didn't exist. Seriously. Hoover refused to admit there was an organized crime problem for years. Why? Some say it was political. Others whisper that Hoover was being blackmailed. Whatever the reason, the mob had room to grow, and they took it. But cracks were forming, the public was getting curious, and journalists were poking around. Then, in 1957, everything blew up at a sleepy little house in Appalachian, New York. A state trooper spotted a bunch of luxury cars parked outside a farmhouse. Turns out it was a secret national mob meeting. Over 60 mobsters, bosses, capos, consiglieri, were there. Think of it like a mafia Comic-Con. When the cops raided the place, it was chaos. Gangsters running through the woods in $300 suits. Embarrassing. And for the first time, the FBI couldn't deny it. Organized crime was real, it was national, and it was powerful. Bonus hidden gem? Around this time, the mob secretly infiltrated the NYC produce markets, controlling the price of fruit and vegetables. Want to sell oranges? Gotta go through the wise guys. Even your salad wasn't safe. But with Appalachian waking the feds up, the game was about to change. New tools, new tactics, and a new generation of gangsters were on the rise. All right, buckle up. The 60s and 70s? That's when the mafia's golden age started slipping. Why? Because the feds finally got their act together. After the Appalachian embarrassment, the FBI launched a full-scale war on the mob. No more pretending organized crime was a myth. Now it was personal. Enter the new weapon, wiretapping. The government passed the Omnibus Crime Control Act in 1968, and suddenly the feds could legally bug phones, cars, and, get this, even lamps. Yeah, one of the biggest mafia takedowns started when the FBI hid a mic in a light fixture inside a meeting room used by the Bonanno family. Sneaky, right? The agents called it the lamp that sank a family. With bugs, informants, aka rats, and pressure mounting, things started to crack. Internal beefs, paranoia, and power plays led to hits left and right, and no one played dirtier than the Gambino family, especially a guy named John Gotti. But before we get to the Dapper Don, quick rewind. In the 60s, the mob still had serious influence. Think Joe Colombo, head of the Colombo family. He tried to go legit with the Italian American Civil Rights League, basically saying, hey, we're not all gangsters. Cute idea, until he got shot in the head during one of his rallies in 1971. Never woke up. Fun fact, many suspect it was the other families who didn't like the attention he was drawing. Stay low, remember? Now, back to Gotti. This guy came up through the Gambinos like a rocket. Slicked back hair, custom suits, charming smile. But behind the grin, stone-cold killer. In 1985, Gotti made a crazy power move. He had his own boss, Paul Big Paulie Castellano, gunned down outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. Broad daylight, Christmas lights in the windows. Total mess. See, Castellano was more about business and staying quiet. Gotti? He was about the streets, the flash, the respect. After the hit, Gotti strolled into the boss's chair like he owned the city. The press went wild, started calling him the Teflon Don, 'cause no charges would stick. Juries got intimidated, witnesses vanished, and Gotti just kept walking. Here's a hidden nugget for you. The FBI got one of their best recordings of Gotti from, wait for it, a bug hidden inside an upstairs closet at the Ravenite Social Club where Gotti hung out. His own mouth did him in. He talked way too much, bragging about hits, trashing his underboss Sammy, the Bull Gravano. And when Gravano heard those tapes, he flipped, testified against Gotti. Boom. In 1992, Gotti got life without parole. The courtroom was packed, the press had a field day. The Dapper Don was done. Oh, and speaking of secrets, around this time the Mafia was also caught running scams involving garbage collection. Yep, they basically rigged trash pickup in NYC. Want to switch haulers? Tough luck. You're in the system. But with Gotti behind bars and rats everywhere, the old-school Cosa Nostra was bleeding, and the feds weren't done yet. All right, so here's where it all starts to unravel. The Mafia might have been untouchable in the 50s and 60s, but by the 80s and 90s, they were getting hit from every angle. Why? One word, baby. RICO. That's the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, passed in 1970. But it didn't come into full swing until ambitious prosecutors like Rudy Giuliani came knocking. See, before RICO, if you wanted to nail a boss, you had to prove they personally committed a crime. Not easy when your main dude sits in a social club all day sipping espresso while his soldiers do the dirty work. But with RICO, you could charge the whole organization. If one soldier did a hit or ran a scam, the boss could be held responsible too. Now you're talking. By the mid-'80s, Giuliani, then U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, decided to go big. Really big. He launched the commission case, targeting all 5 bosses of the NY families at once, something no one had dared try before. It was the Mafia version of the Avengers getting snapped out of existence. Using wiretaps, informants, and RICO, the feds got enough dirt to take down the top dogs of Lucchese, Genovese, Bonanno, Colombo, and Gambino families. It was like dominoes. One flipped, then another, then another. Even Tony Ducks Corallo, the Lucchese boss who got his nickname for ducking subpoenas, couldn't escape. You know how they got him? They bugged his Jaguar. Yeah. A mob boss was literally driving around spilling secrets in his car like it was a confessional, not knowing the feds were listening the whole time. Легенда гласит, что агенты прятались в подземном гараже с антеннами, пока не получили все нужные записи. Then came Operation Donnie Brasco. Undercover FBI agent Joe Pistone infiltrated the Bonanno family for 6 years. 6. That's not just undercover. That's deep cover. He earned their trust, almost got made, and then vanished. When the truth came out, the Bonannos were so humiliated, the commission kicked them off the table for a while. Представь, тебя так жестко подставил коп, что тебя выгоняют из мафии, почти как бан в Discord, только навсегда. By the early 90s, dozens of bosses and capos were behind bars. The Colombo War broke out between 2 factions of the family. It got so bad they were having shootouts in the streets in broad daylight. At that point, the Mafia wasn't ruling New York. They were just trying to survive. Oh, and get this. Remember Sammy the Bull Gravano, the guy who flipped on Gotti? After getting witness protection, the man couldn't stay clean. He got busted in the early 2000s for running an ecstasy ring in Arizona. From the Gambinos to glow sticks, you can't make this stuff up. Bottom line, the combination of RICO, rats, and relentless surveillance turned the once invincible Mafia into a paranoid mess. You couldn't trust your crew, your club, or even your car. But the mob ain't dead yet, just quieter. And darker things were brewing underground. Okay, so by the time we hit the 2000s, most folks thought the Mafia was toast. Old news, washed up, yesterday's gangsters. I mean, the top bosses were locked up, Gotti was dead, liver cancer, 2002, in prison, and all the loudmouths either flipped or vanished. But guess what? The mob never disappeared. It just got smarter, quieter, and a hell of a lot harder to spot. They ditched the flashy suits, the social clubs with espresso and cigars, the big street parades with community outreach. Now it was about white-collar crime, long-term scams, and blending in. These guys were still pulling strings, just without the fireworks. First, they leaned hard into construction rackets, concrete, drywall, union bribes, all still money makers. If you wanted a high rise in NYC, you were probably dealing with guys who had nicknames like Vinny Carwash or Tony Meatballs. Not kidding, real aliases. They also started cozying up with cybercrime crews and Eastern European syndicates, phishing scams, identity theft, credit card fraud. If it made money and had low risk, the Mafia wanted in. Forget hijacking trucks. Now it was about skimming ATMs and flipping burner phones. Old world meets new tech. Another twist? The Mexican cartels took over the drug trade. The mob used to control heroin pipelines from Sicily, but the cartels were ruthless, had better logistics, and didn't play nice. So the Mafia pivoted. They started acting more like brokers, moving product quietly, laundering money, taking a cut here and there. No turf wars, just business. Cold, calculated. You want to hear something wild? In the 2010s, the FBI caught wind of a plan to extort mozzarella cheese distributors in New Jersey. Yeah, cheese. Turns out controlling dairy trucks and distribution routes was a thing, just like in the old days with produce. Тут иронично. Мафия вернулась к сырному рэкету, как в 50-х, полный круг. Meanwhile, the five families still existed: Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, Colombo. But they operated like ghost shadows. No more commission meetings at country houses. Orders got passed through whispers, burner phones, or sometimes coded pastry orders at bakeries. Real method. Cannoli meant yes, sfogliatella meant lay low. And the feds? Still chasing. But the mob got leaner, more cautious. They used lawyers, accountants, and shell companies instead of bats and bullets. You could be sitting next to a capo on the subway and never know it. But make no mistake, they were still out there. In 2011, the FBI pulled off the largest mob bust in history, nabbing over 120 members across multiple families. Charges: loan sharking, extortion, arson, illegal gambling. Classic stuff. But it was like trimming a weed. The roots stayed. Funny side note? One capo was secretly running a kids' karate school. No joke. Teaching discipline by day, collecting debts by night. So yeah, the mafia didn't vanish. It just evolved. No longer kings of the city, but still playing the long game. But one last storm was coming, and it started with a guy wearing a wire where you'd least expect it. All right, we're in the late 2000s and 10s, and the mob's still breathing, but it's more like a wheeze than a roar. Quiet crews, old school rules, no more limos or media stunts. But then, boom, comes Operation Missing Button. And no, it's not about fashion. So what's the deal with that name? In the mafia world, a button man is a made guy, a soldier. If you're missing a button, you're not official. You don't have that sacred blood oath, can't call hits, and definitely don't sit at the grown-ups table. The case got its nickname because the feds discovered that one of the guys involved thought he was a made man, but wasn't. Awkward. But the real kicker? The FBI flipped an actual soldier from the Gambino family who'd been wearing a wire for nearly 3 years. That's insane. You know how hard it is to keep your mouth shut, keep your cover, and record convos around men who've made a career out of spotting rats? This guy pulled it off, and he brought receipts, hundreds of hours of recordings, and not just your usual let's shake this guy down stuff. We're talking details on induction ceremonies, names of active soldiers, family hierarchies, and modern rackets. Want to guess how they were moving cash in the 2020s? Fake recycling scams, sports betting apps, and stealing COVID relief funds. Yep, even a global pandemic became a hustle. But maybe the most embarrassing part for the mafia? These newer guys were sloppy. One capo in the Colombo family got caught on tape trying to explain Venmo to an underboss. It's like PayPal, but your nephew can see it. These weren't the shadowy dons of the Gotti era. These were aging tough guys trying to navigate an iPhone. Still, it was a massive bust. In 2022, the FBI charged dozens of guys connected to multiple families in the Northeast: Gambino, Lucchese, Colombo, Genovese. Charges ranged from extortion to wire fraud to trying to muscle in on a solar panel contract. Clean energy, dirty hands. And if that wasn't enough, the feds had another trick: rats going public. Like, really public? Remember Michael Franzese, former Colombo capo regime? He's now got a YouTube channel, a podcast, and a motivational speaking tour. Sammy the Bull Gravano, also out of prison, and also on YouTube, telling stories about whackings like they're bedtime tales. This new wave of ex-wise guys is rewriting history in front of ring lights. Some mob purists hate it. Some of the new generation eats it up. Either way, the Omerta, the code of silence, is officially dead. But wait, there's one more twist in this modern mob story. It happened in court, during a trial, when a prosecutor showed a jury a surveillance video of a made guy getting made. Yeah, an actual induction ceremony caught on a hidden camera in a dingy basement with wine, candles, and a photo of a saint. That was the ultimate "we see you" from the feds. Old rituals? Old tactics? They're not sacred anymore. So where does that leave the mob? Not gone, not powerful, but still lurking. In construction, in waste management, in unions, less like a lion, more like a snake in tall grass. So here we are, 2020s, modern day. And guess what? The 5 families still exist. Yup, they're not extinct, just different. Think less Goodfellas, more LinkedIn with brass knuckles. Let's break it down. The Gambino family, once Gotti's empire, is still the most talked about, but way less flashy now. Their suspected leadership? Guys like Lorenzo Mannino, a quiet, old-school Sicilian. He keeps a low profile, doesn't do interviews, doesn't rock $2,000 suits. Word is he's tight with Zips, Sicilian Mafia dudes, and leans more toward don't get caught than look like a boss. Smart, the Genovese family, still considered the most disciplined. These guys always were the accountants of the mob world. Less killing, more cooking the books. In fact, FBI reports say they've got front companies in plumbing, scaffolding, and real estate. One Genovese guy even got caught running a loan sharking racket out of a Bronx deli. Pastrami and paybacks. Lucchese family? They got rocked hard in the 2000s, but they're still there. In 2017, they had a case where 19 members got indicted, including high-ranking capos, for racketeering, gambling, and, construction fraud. Classic move, using no-show jobs on union sites to launder money. You think that cousin of yours who's working construction but never lifts a hammer is just lazy? Think again. Colombo family? They were a mess for years. Infighting, civil wars, shootings. But in 2021, the feds charged the entire Colombo leadership in a wide-ranging racketeering case, like a clean sweep. One of them, the underboss Benjamin Benji Castellazzo, was in his 80s. That's right, the Mafia's going full retirement home. And then there's the Bonanno family, the black sheep since the Donnie Brasco debacle. But they've clawed their way back, quietly. A 2023 report said they were dabbling in online gambling, crypto laundering, and good old-fashioned shakedowns of small businesses in Queens. Fun fact, one soldier got caught trying to extort a weed dispensary. Modern problems require modern rackets. Here's what's wild. The new generation of mobsters? They're low-tech, like intentionally. No smartphones, no social media. Some of them still use pagers. Why? Because they know the feds are watching every click, every DM. These guys are treating the internet like it's radioactive. And while the Mafia's not stacking bodies in alleys anymore, they're still making quiet money. Through labor unions, waste hauling, construction bids, loan sharking, even selling counterfeit luxury goods. Think Gucci bags out of a trunk in Brooklyn. But maybe the strangest twist? The mobs become part of pop culture. You've got guys who flip now doing Q&As on TikTok, people taking tours of mob hit locations, and entire Reddit threads about which family's still the strongest. Spoiler, it's probably still Genovese. And every once in a while, someone vanishes. No body, no witnesses, just gone. Reminding everyone, the Mafia ain't gone. It's just quieter, smarter, slipperier. So, what's next? All right, so we've followed the Mafia from Sicilian slums to skyscraper scams. But here's the thing. The real influence of La Cosa Nostra isn't just in dead bodies and court docs. It's in our culture, our politics, and even our language. The mob left fingerprints all over the American dream, whether we like it or not. Let's start with politics. Ever hear the rumors about the Kennedy family's ties to the mob? The story goes that Joe Kennedy, the patriarch, had back-channel deals with bootleggers during Prohibition. Later, some claim the mob helped JFK win the 1960 election, especially in Illinois, thanks to some creative vote counting in Chicago. Mobbed-up unions, dead people voting. The usual. Now, was that ever proven? Nope. But the whispers stuck. And get this, when JFK's brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, went after the Mafia hard, Sam Giancana, Chicago outfit boss, reportedly felt betrayed. "We put him in the White House," he allegedly fumed, "and this is how we get paid back?" There's even a theory that RFK's war on the mob got both brothers killed. Conspiracy territory? Sure, but it shows how deep the mob ran in American power circles, even if they didn't always get top billing. Next, let's talk language and lifestyle. Words like capo, underboss, whack, wise guy, and omerta are everyday lingo now. TV shows like The Sopranos didn't just depict the mafia, they reshaped how we talk, think, and joke about organized crime. How many people yelled "fugged about it" at each other after watching Donnie Brasco? And speaking of pop culture, the mob might have killed people, but Hollywood gave them immortality. The Godfather turned murderers into tragic heroes. Goodfellas made snitches and psychos into rock stars. Even Tony Soprano had therapy sessions that made audiences feel bad for a guy who once strangled someone with a wire. Here's the irony. Real wise guys started copying the movies. In the 90s, some mobsters actually modeled their induction ceremonies after The Godfather, including burning Saint cards and dramatic oaths. Life imitating art, imitating murder. Meanwhile, their influence in legit business can't be overstated. Casinos, built on mafia cash. Vegas as we know it wouldn't exist without Bugsy Siegel and his wild vision for the Flamingo Hotel. And the unions? Ask old-timers in construction or sanitation if the boys still show up on payday. And let's not forget the oddball legacies, like how the mob once ran garbage routes so tightly in New York that you couldn't open a restaurant in Manhattan without paying for pickup, and not just to the city. Or how a guy in the Genovese family once controlled the entire supply of artichokes in NYC. Yeah, artichokes. They called him the Artichoke King. Even today, you see their legacy in subtle ways. Fancy restaurants with back rooms. The mystique of being connected. Every time someone talks about doing business the old-school way, that's the ghost of the mafia whispering in the background. Because even if the bodies stopped dropping, the aura, the myth of La Cosa Nostra became a part of America itself. All right, this is it, the last stop on our mob tour. After a century of hits, hustles, and headlines, the question isn't, where's the mafia today? It's, why is it still here at all? Let's be real. The mafia should have been dead and buried by now. Between RICO charges, FBI wiretaps, rats turning state's witness, and a million Netflix documentaries, you'd think the whole thing would have collapsed into dust. But nope, it's still limping along, because the mafia was never just a crime group. It was a system, a mindset, a survival strategy. Start with this. The mafia fills voids. Immigrants got ignored by the cops. The mob offered protection. Workers got screwed by greedy bosses. The mob gave them a union. Couldn't get a loan from a bank. You went to a loan shark. Brutal? Sure, but also reliable, at least until you missed a payment. And even as law enforcement evolved, so did the mob. When wiretaps made social clubs dangerous, meetings moved to car trunks, deli counters, and coded text messages. When drugs brought too much heat, they pivoted to construction rackets, Medicare fraud, and even fake COVID testing centers. Yes, that happened in 2021. They hustled a pandemic. But what really keeps the mob alive? Loyalty, fear, and the dream of easy power. Even in the 2000s and 20s, there are still young guys in Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Queens who want to be made. Not for money, you can make more in crypto. Not for fame, Instagram's faster, but for respect. That old-school, ironclad, nobody messes with you rep. For some people, that's everything. And yeah, the mafia's a shadow of what it once was. They don't own judges anymore. Politicians don't beg for endorsements from bosses. Most of the old dons are dead, locked up, or retired to Florida condos. But the name, La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, still carries weight. Whispers still happen in back rooms. Fear still lingers in certain neighborhoods. And sometimes, just sometimes, a body still turns up in a trunk. Here's the thing. As long as there's money to be made and people willing to break the rules to get it, there's always going to be a mob. Maybe not the one from the movies, maybe not the one from the headlines, but a mob, silent, hidden, waiting. So next time you walk past a quiet Italian bakery or hear about a no-show job on a construction site or see a guy in a tracksuit giving envelopes to a guy in a Lexus, just know it ain't over. Final words? The Mafia never dies. It just changes suits.